Good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you. How are you? Just like looking at all of the little faces on my screen. Um, how I wish we were all in the Zendo and I could take each of you aside for 5 minutes and just chat with you and find out how your lives are right now. But we have Zoom, and so we'll do it that way for the time being. So we're nearing the home stretch with our Ango period and our study text for the Ango period, Dogen's Uji. I'm going to try to express my understanding, such as it is, of this text today by telling a few stories and trying to connect them back to Uji. So as it turns out, if my father was still alive, February 8th would have been his 100th birthday. And Sarah had the idea that we should celebrate his birthday by making a nice meal, something he would have enjoyed. And looking at photos of our childhood with my brother and his wife on a Zoom call. Sort of our own little Day of the Dead ceremony in February instead of November. So I happen to have a bunch of my parents' Kodachrome slides on a DVD, and I popped it in the DVD player and turned the computer around so that my brother and his wife could see them. And we just sat for an hour. This was after we had had dinner separately, and just talked about what we saw. So I'm 63 now, so these slides are 60 to 65 years old. Actually, I just recently spoke to a second cousin of mine whose mother is my 79-year-old cousin who lives in Michigan with her 3 dogs. And in these slides, she's a beautiful, beautiful young woman. My mother was a young woman too, petite, dark hair, glasses, beautifully dressed. Some of you may remember that people actually used to dress beautifully. My father, picture after picture, had a radiant smile. As we looked at the slides, the beginning slides, we saw them dating. And then we went on their honeymoon with them to the Poconos. We saw the lodge that they stayed at. We laughed at the men, probably hotel staff, dressed up in drag for a beauty contest. It was quite funny. I don't know if they would do that sort of thing today, but I'm sure it was very entertaining for all of the newlyweds at this Pocono lodge. And even though it was only the Poconos, life for this young couple in the 1950s in Pennsylvania seemed pretty happy. 11 months after the honeymoon, we looked at my baby pictures. And 3 years later, we looked at my brother's baby pictures. So my brother and I, we laughed, we shared memories for about an hour, while Sarah and Ali asked questions and made connections to the people on the slides that they knew. So as we've been studying Zen Master Dogen's Uji during this study period, I've been able to see myself as time, to see the way that time flows through me. Where are my mother and father now? When I look at my father's bare chest as he stands next to the swimming pool on his honeymoon, I can see my bare chest. His body and my body are the same. My mother wore glasses. I started wearing glasses in the 3rd grade. My father was a public school teacher. My mother was a nurse. And then she taught medical assisting in a vocational school because she didn't want to work nursing hours once she had children. My father grew up in the aftermath of the Great Depression. My mother a decade later. How did their experiences shape their attitudes? How did they shape mine? Where's that little baby that they had dressed so proudly? Where is that 3-year-old boy with his new brother? And what of my parents' students and their students' children and grandchildren? If I went back to my hometown today and drove to the places where we once lived and where they once worked, what would I see? Master Dogen says, do not think that time merely flies away. Do not see flying away as the only function of time. If time merely flies away, you would be separated from time. The reason you do not clearly understand the time being is that you think of time only as passing. In essence, all things in the entire world are linked with one another as moments. Because all moments are the time being, they are your time being. Because all moments are the time being, they are your time being. So Uji's helped me see time in this way, as another dimension of Indra's net through which we are all connected. My parents' time being, my parents' effort brought me into this world. Sarah's effort created a lovely moment with my brother and my wife. All of our efforts brought us here together today. Today I shared my parents' slides with you. I shared an image of my young cousin as a beautiful young woman who at this time is 79 years old, living in Michigan with her daughter, my second cousin, and their dogs. This moment is our time being. The little baby in the pictures is no more. We're stuck with a 63-year-old man now giving a talk. As Master Dogen says, all beings of all kinds in the visible and invisible realms are the time being actualized by your complete effort, flowing due to your complete effort. This past year has amplified my sense of historical time, the ways in which the past is in the present and the seeds of the future are in the present too. We've listened to a number of Dharma talks right here about our country's history of slavery. And I've realized the myriad ways in which this country's history of slavery and its aftermath continue to play out. Today's time being is today's time being. It is not separate from yesterday's time being. I just finished reading a book called Strangers in Their Own Land. It's written by a Berkeley sociologist, Arlie Hochschild. Actually, when Trump was elected in 2016, Arlie had spent the preceding 5 years immersing herself in the lives of people in the community in and around St. Charles, Louisiana. Most of the people she met and got to know have right-wing political beliefs. And Hochschild is interested in the experiences and the emotions that underlie our political beliefs. It's a wonderful book. I encourage you to read it, Strangers in Their Own Land. Just one little vignette. In it, we meet a couple who become her friends. They live at the edge of a bayou that's been destroyed by toxic waste. They knew the beauty of the place before negligence and greed destroyed it. They've had family and friends die of cancer. Their property value has been eroded, but they hang on to their home, living in the shadow of a giant ethane cracker. And yet the beliefs that give meaning to their lives and the issues that influence how they vote perpetuate the system that has caused so much suffering in their lives. The issues, the beliefs, the experiences and systems that they are conditioned by go back not just their lifetime, but decades, to the Civil War, to Reconstruction, to the Jim Crow era, to the civil rights era of the 1960s, to Bobby Jindal as governor of Louisiana. Hawksfield continually confronts what she calls her empathy wall, in which she falls into her point of view instead of being open to the lived experience of the people she's talking with. She asks us to confront our empathy wall. Our human tendency is to try to reduce reality to simple conclusions, to sound bites. Hawksfield allows us to glimpse a tiny bit of reality's complexity, its beauty, and its sadness. Every moment in time is the turning of the Dharma wheel. Each one of us is a being flowing in time, bringing the universe into existence with every in-breath, destroying the universe with every out-breath. The examples I've been giving use personal memory and sociological research to illustrate something about Dogen's Uji. But they miss something. It's still my discursive mind reflecting on reality. And I know that my memories, my storehouse consciousness in Buddhist cosmology, give rise to my self-delusion. I think that that baby is me, just a little bit older. Our storehouse consciousness, our memories gives rise to our belief in a permanent self. So I want to share a koan that might push our understanding a little further. It's Dao Wu's condolence call, which is included in both Dogen's collection of koans as well as the Blue Cliff Record. So it goes as follows. Priest Jian Yuan of Tan once accompanied his teacher Dao Wu on a condolence call to a family funeral. When they arrived, he tapped the coffin and said, "Is this life or is this death?" Dao Wu said, "I won't say life, I won't say death." Jian Yuan says, "Why won't you say?" Dao Wu says, "I won't say, I won't say." On their way back, Jian Yuan says, "You should say it quickly for me, teacher, or I will hit you." Dao Wu says, "Hit me if you may, but I will not say." Jian Yuan hit him. Goes on, after returning to the monastery, Dao Wu said to Jian Yuan, "You should take leave for a while. He's just been hit. I'm afraid if the head monk finds out about this, he will make trouble for you. Hitting a Zen master is not a good thing." After Dao Wu passed away, Jian Yuan went to see Dao Wu's successor, Shishuan, and told him the story and asked for guidance. Shishuan said, "I won't say life, I won't say death." Jian Yuan said, "Why won't you say it?" Shishuan said, "I won't say, I won't say." Jian Yuan immediately realized it. So what's going on here? Dao Wu in the story is the Dharma brother of Yunyan, who was Dongshan's teacher. Dongshan was one of the founders of Soto Zen. So it's a pretty big dude in the Zen lineage. And in this case, Jian Yuan is attending a funeral with Dao Wu. And he raps on the coffin and asks his teacher if the body inside it is alive or dead. Now, it's kind of a comical setup in a way. Of course, he knows that the person's died. So what's he really asking? Perhaps, he's heard of some Tibetan Buddhist notion of rebirth and is hung up on the idea about whether he's going to be reborn in the next life. I think, at some age, we become conscious that we will die one day. Our avoidance of death, in Western society is a clue that the idea of death has a strange hold over us living, breathing human beings. So Dao's response is interesting. I won't say. He doesn't say that he can't say. He says that he won't say. I think Jin Yuan is troubled by this death. We can imagine that what he is really asking is what dies? Is there something that lives on after death? Is there a soul? Will I live on after I die? And what is the self? Does the self die? Is there nothing left after I'm put in my coffin? Who am I? Really? Who am I? We have to feel for Jin Yuan. He's asking really one of the most fundamental questions of practice, one of the most difficult questions we can ask. He's not asking if the body in the coffin is dead. He's asking, what ground can I stand on? And I think he's begging in a way, can I stand on the ground of life, please? Can I stand on the ground of eternal life at least through all this suffering, after all this suffering? And of course, he's stuck in a perspective of differentiation. Help me understand life and death, he says. The commentary on this koan says, grappling within the forest of brambles, Zen practitioners the world over probe the question of life and death. Before it's realized, it's like a 10-mile high wall or a bottomless gorge. Now we know that the Buddha taught that there is no self. To the extent that there is an idea that we think of as the self, it's just the 5 skandhas, the 5 aggregates. Aside from these 5 aggregates, there's nothing else. Everything is ceaseless change. So what dies? The Buddha said, oh, bhikshu, every moment you are born, decay, and die. The baby in my parents' slides is long gone. There's a 63-year-old man talking over Zoom. This is it. Dao Wu isn't going to reinforce his students' conditioning, his preconceptions, his beliefs. He's sending Jin Yuan back to the cushion, which means he's sending Jin Yuan back to his questions. He's sending him back to face his life at this moment, as our teachers always do. The commentary continues. After it is seen, it is realized that from the beginning, the obstructions have always been nothing but the self. The obstructions are nothing but the self. Lost in the double barrier of life and death, the monk has to know. Because of intimacy, the old master won't say. From the time of the Buddha down to the present, this is how it's been. However, if you think this old koan is about the corpse being alive or dead, then you too have missed the old master's teachings. There is no place to put this gigantic body. When the universe collapses, it's indestructible. There is no place to put this gigantic body. Because when we realize ourselves, we realize that it's everywhere. It's constantly changing, and it's indestructible. I want to tell one final story. We were on another Zoom call, because this is what passes for a social life these days. In this case, it was with one of my close friends from college. And he was telling me, I didn't actually know this story, but he was telling me the story of how he transferred in to the applied physics department at Cornell, because he joined a year or two after I had started there from another college. He transferred in from another college. And he transferred in just after breaking up with a girl. He was dating at a far younger age than I was. And he was devastated, and he just couldn't focus. And you don't get through the applied physics department at Cornell if you can't focus. So he went to the professor who was the head of the undergraduate relations, head of undergraduate relations in the department. He didn't actually remember his name. And he told him his story. And this man said, if you need to take time off, take as much time as you need. Once you've pulled yourself together, if you want to come back to the department, there will be a place for you. Just think about that. This troubled, whatever, how old was he? 18, 19. Take as much time as you need. Once you've pulled yourself together, if you want to come back to the department, there will be a place for you. I immediately blurted out the name of this professor, Paul Hartman. I have his obituary right here. So my friend Roger and I both had our encounters with Paul Hartman. We just didn't know that we knew the man. We both knew the man. This is from the Cornell Chronicle, May 24th, 2005. And it says, Paul Hartman, pioneering Cornell physicist, historian, and 100% human being, dies at 91. Paul Leon Hartman, a pioneering researcher and Cornell University professor emeritus, recognized by his colleagues for his grace and humility, died at his home at Kendall at Ithaca on May 20th. He was 91. Hartman was one of the first to investigate the use of X-rays generated as a byproduct of high-energy electron accelerators. In the 50s, he and his colleague Diran Tambulian measured the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation from an electron beam circulating in a synchrotron that I used to walk by on my way from campus back to my apartment in College Town. So, Paul Leon Hartman. So I knew his name because I had had a similar experience. I was struggling, and Paul Hartman met me exactly where I was. And my friend and I of 40 plus years met Paul Hartman again on that call. Is he alive or dead? I'll end with a poem. Yesterday, while I was working, my grandfather was at my side. Today, the spruce branches are my companion, tossed as they are by the wind. On this path that is no path, we walk together.